Hello and welcome to Snide's Return, a tabletop roleplay podcast. My guest today has surveyed the tabletop landscape and conducted a threat assessment. Well, more or less. He wields the weapons of war and roleplay deftly, as though to conduct dominion over Ferris realms. Now, I'm not claiming this privateer is some rogue trader, but he is a doctor of sorts. That means there is a bright future and darker days ahead, cast in dark iron. It is a pleasure to welcome TTRPG Content Creator, podcaster, wargamer, and writer, Chris Handley. Chris, welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back. Yeah, I think it was only a bit before Christmas we last chatted, I think.
Something like that.
I can't remember now. It's too much has happened.
Well, for those that haven't caught our first interview, Chris, why don't you give us a brief background about yourself and how you got into tabletop role-playing games, please?
Sure. So I am a software engineer by day, tabletop RPG writer by night. I mainly write for the Warhammer RPGs, predominantly for Wrath and Glory. So that's the Warhammer 40k RPG. And most recently, over the last year or so, and that's what we're going to be talking about, writing a lot for Privateer Press's Iron Kingdom setting, which is a D&D 5th edition based setting. It dates back longer than that. And then otherwise, of course, I podcast via Dark Days Radio, and we cover lots of horror RPG content, amongst other things, World of Darkness, which I've also written for, and Chronicles of Darkness.
All right. Well, so we can get the links out the way here at the start and really delve into Iron Kingdoms. Yeah. Where can we find you and everything you're associated with, please?
So Darker Days Radio is www.darker-days.org. You can find all episodes there of that cover everything. So that's Darker Days Radio. That covers also Darkhammer, our Worlds of Warhammer RPG podcast series. And also currently there is an ongoing series by Crystal Mazer, who is a co-host, and she is doing a whole series on how to get into writing for RPGs. So, what are contracts like for RPGs and all that stuff, things like that. Otherwise, you can find out more about me at www.christopher-handley.com, and that's just like my blog, business kind of contact. I need to write something for it. It's been like a month since I've written on there, so I need to do that. But that's everything. Obviously, we're on pretty much every other bit of social media, so you can find us elsewhere.
All right. Well, I will make sure links to your social media websites, Privateer Press, Darker Days Radio, and all those sort of good things are down in the description below. So please scroll down, follow those links, support Chris, Darker Days Radio, Privateer Press, and all the links there, please. So Privateer Press, how did you get involved with them initially? How did you come onto the team?
Really, that's the joy of the modern age that we're in with streaming and podcasting is, you can get recognized. And if you show that you love a setting, which I do in this case, and you know it and you have an enthusiasm for it, and you prove that you're a person that's fun to work with and good to work with and professional, people will come back to you and go, hey, do you want to write for this? And that's basically what happened with Iron Kingdom. So I was running a stream of Iron Kingdom's 2nd edition RPG. So if people are aware of that, that uses the same rule system as the war game. So it's a 2d6 based system. I ran that for a number of months, and then the lead dev for Privateer Press for Iron Kingdoms was like, "Hey, do you want to write for it?" And I was like, "Okay." Even though my D&D 5th edition knowledge and experience is growing and limited, but is growing day by day by writing for it. So that's really how that happened.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah, you played in so many fantastic systems that to hear your limited but growing experience with 5e in this day and age is sort of almost refreshing in a weird kind of quirky kind of way, which is great because you've got so much other things to draw from. So Privateer Press putting out Iron Kingdoms. You said there was a 2nd edition. This setting's been around for a while.
Oh yeah. This has been around since, I'm gonna have to get my dates right for this. When did Witchfire come out? I say so. So we have to go back all the way back to D20 system, and Private Press put out the Witchfire trilogy, and that was done through really like the very. I mean, it's timely we're talking about this because that was like one of the first major open games license third party bits of content put out, and also I think in some respects became kind of like the poster boy, as it were, for what you can do with D&D back in the day with that. And it represents why for at the time, I guess, for Private Press, as they were developing the setting and the world for what would be the war game, it was an avenue for getting that setting out there and known, and the concepts developed. It was that vehicle for just doing that before the war game was ready, because there's a long timeline with making miniatures and sculpting them and play testing to destruction a rule system. So yeah, it's a long history, and so they did. I think they did the Witchfire trilogy. That was like 3 books. They did the Monster Nomicon back in the day, which was a book of monsters for D&D. That was, I believe, very well received because, again, who doesn't like more monsters to throw at your players? And then they did and of course, like the Witchfire trilogy came out without anything else, so it explained the world, explained how like what warjacks were, what steamjacks were, what warcasters are, all that kind of thing, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But it didn't really. It's still trying to keep it within the realms of everything you need to run this is still within what would have been the D20 D&D book at the time. And then they brought out a character guide and a world guide, which then I think that was around about the same time as like the war game had finally like landed, and that's definitely around about the 2003 year period, because that's when I got into the war game. That's when it first appeared on shelves. When I was still working for Games Workshop as a part timer, because I was at university and I was working at Games Workshop store. So you're there, independent, friendly local game store, and you go, what's that war game over there? That looks interesting, and that's how I became aware of the world. So I've come at it through the war game, and I think that would have been most of the books they ever produced for D20. I'm sure someone will correct me on that. But then there was the second edition of the war game, and I think it was around about 2013-ish. 2013, yeah, when they did a second edition of the roleplay game, and they changed the system over to being the same as the war game. And I was living in Germany at the time, and I'd also taken a break from from war games in general. And because of that RPG edition, that's what got me back into wargaming as well. So I had like an 8-year gap on war games. I was just like, I'm doing my PhD, I can't afford them. And then that got me back, and that's where I'm now with, I still collect toy soldiers, obviously, and that did more books, that had a few expansions, a world guide, and now we're up to the last 2 and a bit years of Private Press doing their 3rd edition of the RPG. The 4th edition of the war game has now arrived, and I've got miniatures from that. And I think there's more books out now for Iron Kingdoms, and there's more setting than there ever was before. So it's an interesting time to get into this setting, because it feels like it's definitely matured, and I say that for a multitude of reasons, both in terms of the setting material, like where the world is up to as the history, the timeline has progressed, in terms of how we are trying to make as many options playable for players, and then there's also like readdressing stuff, which you look at first edition Iron Kingdoms, you're like, how is this even allowed as a concept? And you just, fortunately, like developers, like hand on heart, goes like, nah, we're gonna fix that because that's awful. It's like it's bad. I don't know why it was done. We're gonna fix it, and that's been well received. So that's Iron Kingdoms it is a popular setting because of that vintage, I guess we say about the Witchfire trilogy. It's just quite well renowned.
All right. Well, so that sort of builds the history of the games. Since you gave us a fantastic history of both the role playing game and the war game there. Now moving into the setting itself for those sort of stepping on at the Kickstarter level, the ground level. What are the foundations of the world and the history, and where are we stepping into it as part of this Kickstarter?
Oh, okay, right. So we've had now 1, 2, 3 Kickstarters, and we've got a fourth one coming up from Private Press. So we've got Iron Kingdoms Requiem was the original Kickstarter. So that's the new character setting, the groundworks of the setting for 5e. And there were some scenarios and some miniatures that go along with that came out. Then there was where I started working on things is Borderlands and Beyond, which looks at the Borderlands and beyond of the Iron Kingdoms and the other cultures. We then, after that, went to the Nightmare Empire, which is another big faction within the wargame, which is, from the name of it, is as it is. It's a realm of undead and playable undead. So that's what those books brought along to the ride for that. And where we're coming up to now is what's known as the Deep Wild. So we're going to be looking at the other peoples, cultures, things out way beyond any of the kingdoms. So there's going to be some more new monsters and some, firm favorite factions returning as playable characters. And then so there's already a lot of stuff there for new people to get into the setting. Like if you want to get started, you just pick up Iron Kingdoms Requiem, and that's all you need with that is the D&D. You don't even need the other stuff. You just need the SRD.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. You just need the SRD. Like if you want to go out and buy, the hardback books, then by all means do so. But you just need the SRD. So. And that's a guide already to what we can expect in the setting, because there are goblins, there are dwarves, there are elves, there are humans, but there are and there are many of the same classes that we expect, but there are those kind of unique tweaks that Iron Kingdoms brings to that setting that makes it feel like it's not a Tolkien kind of esque typical setting. It's not even like, so I guess we're talking about like it's not like Conan. If we're going to take another classic fantasy setting, it's not Tolkien. It upends certain things, and I guess the thing that sets it apart is it's got certain fantasy tropes we expect. Some of those are upended, and then we've got technology. And I guess the thing to explain is the way to explain it is, how we like in Lord of the Rings, we know, I mean, it's not spoiler alert here, obviously, but like Saruman's like, oh, his powers are broken. If we go from the actual books, staff's broken, his powers are gone, but he has the knowledge, so he kickstarts a sort of industrial revolution. We know this. He makes bombs. He makes bombs. He screws over Helm's Deep with a bomb. So that's technology that he brings. So Iron Kingdoms almost takes that germ of an idea and runs with it. And so you've got a world that's got the fantasy tropes we kind of understand, but we've also got the industry that, to the extent that the world is on the brink of or is progressing through an industrial revolution that is partly powered by magic.
Okay.
And so if I was to explain Iron Kingdoms in a grand way, I would go, right, imagine Lord of the Rings, but sharp, if that makes sense. So you've got firearms, excellent. You've got large armies, as you would do during Napoleonic warfare. You've got steam trains, you've got steam engines, and then you've got magical autonomous steam jacks. So and they are the steam jack, which is kind of like the main, not focus, but I guess encapsulates the Iron Kingdoms in a nutshell, because it represents magic and technology thrust together to accelerate the development of this world.
All right. Yeah, that's. I'm just sort of I was thinking of Sean Bean from the Sharp restaurants, because that just is one of the things that I think of when you think of Sharp. And then I was sort of relating these touchstones almost. You mentioned on the fantasy side, sort of Tolkien and Conan, but beyond that, and then what could sort of come in from that technological side. And it's such a fantastic sort of melting pot. I was going to say amalgam. That's a word of ideas from the setting, from the character options, and all the books that are available, and the ones that are coming, the Deep Wilds. What are some of your favorite things that have come out of this game?
Right, let's think about this hard. Okay, so so there's, if I was to pick like my go-to place to run in the setting, to start any story, is the city of Corvus, which is the focal point initially. Actually, no, it's the entire focal point of the Witchfire trilogy. And it's important because it's where the treaties of the Iron Kingdoms were signed. So it's where the 4 major kingdoms of Western and Moran signed it and went, we have some sort of an accord, like that means anything, but they signed it. And this city is kind of a bit Venetian in that it's on the confluence of 3 rivers, and it's sinking into the mud. There's an undercity because they keep building on top and it keeps sinking into the earth. It's known as the City of Ghosts, and you could say maybe there's an element of like Edinburgh in there. I guess it has that kind of Gothic architecture, and then when you combine that with the fact that of where the technology is, with people walking around in like dusters and bowler hats and top hats and so forth, you can then get a sense of the type of stories you can tell there. So I guess when people play D&D, is it always about killing things? So one of the things I like running, like investigative procedural kind of like investigations frameworked around horror fantasy, and Corvus allows you to do that. You're going to get industrial espionage going on, and then there's going to be some ghosts or something, or someone's employed a ghost to do industrial espionage for them. So Corvus is one bit in the setting that I would go, I love. I also really like the Kingdom of Lael, because it's this kingdom's being like split up, invaded by 2 factions and split between them, and it's now come in the setting. I think it's almost like having a bit of a rebirth, and that's almost like France and Italy merged together. Again, but they have within them, they're the home of the Order of the Golden Crucible, who are alchemists. So alchemy is a thing in the setting, and the fun thing about them is they're exploring how you make humans tap into their kind of like psionic powers. So this is where Iron Kingdoms gets quite interesting. There is magic, and magic is not something you use lightly. Like, magic is massively dangerous. The reason you use magic in the setting, if you're a wizard or a sorcerer, you're using magic to blow things up or to cause great change. You do not do things like, I'm going to light a candle with a little bit of magic. The setting is not about that. And that's where the technology comes in, because, or at least alchemy also comes in, because those allow a means for channeling magic for the common man. So, if you want to have something that illuminates the building that runs off magic, where you've got this little like dynamo that runs on rare metals that sucks in the ambient arcane energies to light a candle effectively. So that's where the technology in that whole industrial revolution fits in with magic. Is about almost there's an element of socialism in there about magic and how it's spread out to the masses. Other things I like in the setting, I have a massive soft spot for a faction again that was important to the Witchfire trilogy called the Scorn. And they come from like the opposite end of the continent, and they're all about torture and pain to create magic. And they don't have warcasters. So warcasters are humans that know how to control warjacks and channel magic through technology. Instead, they've got warlocks. And when I say warlock, this is an important point for people in Entire Kingdoms. They're not the warlocks you know from D&D. Warlocks are able to commune with beasts and channel their rage and use that for magic. So the Scorn are just like this empire of beasts that have been, enslaved to them, and they've kind of got a vampiric element to them, but they're not. They're kind of a bit dark elf-like, but they're not. They just got this. They feel quite unique compared to other settings. There's just tons in the setting. Dragons are completely wild in the setting. Dragons are scary, monumentally massive things, and like we're talking like they're like the size of, we're talking almost size of mountains. We're talking that kind of scale, and they're a huge part of the setting because they can carve off bits of themselves to create new dragons. They can consume dragons and bring them back into themselves, and their blood can taint people and create dragon spawn, and that's another whole huge thing in the setting. There's just a lot. Kador as a society, as a kingdom, has kind of a Tsarist Russia feel to it.
Right.
I say Russia. I would say it's, again, this is where we're, the setting, the world is updated. I guess those, let's say, Tsarist elements, but also, I mean, generally more Slavic kingdoms kind of feel to it. Whereas Ord has an element of like Spain and Portugal. Signar is kind of, I guess what you would say is if America had existed like well before the Industrial Revolution, like a good deal before, and was a medieval kingdom that, if you consider the society around that, there's loads. There's some weird races. One of the ones that I'm looking forward to coming back in the next Kickstarter that's playable is Gator Folk. So that is literally what it sounds like. Anthropomorphic gators, and they live in the swamps. They have giant gator beasts. They do kind of a form of necromancy, and they're just really fun. They were a fun faction to paint as a wargame army, and I think they're a really fun. They're just interesting again because their culture is not civilized in commas, civilized, but I mean that's the point about the Deep Wild book, is to try and look at these things and not go, well, they may seem barbaric by human standards, but actually by their own standards, they're actually, they're quite, they have their own reasons for why they do things, and they're in touch with nature. There's a lot of stuff coming that's in the new book. So we've got bog trogs and croaks. So these are aquatic races or frog-like races, more war beasts, more feats, more personalization options. So I mean, any other questions about the setting? Because there's also, it's not just the setting, there are the tools to allow you to make the characters in a way that D&D doesn't normally allow you to do.
Would you mind explaining how?
Okay, so in D&D you've got heritage modifiers. I don't use the word racial because it's a dated term, but if you're a dwarf, you are likely you get like it's a bonus to Constitution, isn't it, or something stupid like that. So, but they're locked in the basic D&D SRD. So what Iron Kingdoms brings is instead, when you choose your character's heritage, there are very few automatic bonuses based upon that heritage, unless it's things like a keen sense of smell because you're a type of anthropomorphic pig, because they are the pharaoh and they're very good at sniffing things out. But it's not like saying, oh, you're a pharaoh, thus you're completely stupid, so your intelligence goes down. Like, that's just crap. So what they bring in are essences, and essences can be like you're mighty, or you're an intellectual, or you're a devout faithful, or so you've got that kind of more fine control on how you build your character. So you have those. So you've chosen your heritage, you choose your essence, you're then going to choose your archetype or your class and your subclasses. So a class could be gun mage. So they sound exactly what they do. They I know, again, one of my favorite classes. They
sound very cool.
Basically they've got pistols made of magically attuned metals. They inscribe runes on their bullets, on their shots, and when they fire them, it channels the spell at the target using that bullet. And the subclasses there are different schools of gun mage. So then we've done 1, 2, 3, 4 stages of character development there. And then the fifth type is you can choose your there are backgrounds. So again, these are like ways of saying, like, okay, so say you were like trying to play a soldier, but you want to play a particular one from Kador. Well, there's a troop type called a man of war who wear these big mechanical bits of armor. So let's take that, and again, that gives you a few bonuses, a few background modifiers. Again, they're all tools to help a player, especially one in a setting so well developed, to understand and play something which it helps them along that way. And if you play the war game, you can go, oh, I'm definitely playing this miniature type that I have in my collection. And then what's on top of that? Then you've got your adventuring companies. So that then allows you to say, if all the players play certain heritages and certain classes that fit this company, then you'll get a few more bonuses again, because you've limited yourself. You're going to get some bonuses because you're playing to quite a particular thematic party. So that could be a special ops reconnaissance team for the army of Signar. You could be some pirates. You could be all members of the Order of Illumination, who are witch hunters. Well, I say witch hunters, demon hunters, because again, their view on witchcraft has changed recently in the setting. Who they thought were the bad guys were not the bad guys, which is really fun. So there's lots of options to build the character you want.
No, it's amazing. The gun mage made me think of I don't know if you've seen it or anyone else has seen it. The anime, it's a sci-fi anime to be fair, but it's called Outlaw Star, and he uses a caster gun where the bullets are inscribed with spells, and he loads them into the weapon. So that just sort of triggered that and immediately made me smile, because it's something I can relate to and then sort of engage in the character with. So
yeah, and I would say, like, with Iron Kingdoms, there's definitely ranges of how you approach the setting. You can play it very low key. Your investigator's very Sherlock Holmes. Magic is maybe not intruding very often in your adventures, and you might only have a few. You might only ever see like dwarves and a few elves, or you might be dealing with some of the more over the top elements of the setting, and it gets more into that kind of almost Final Fantasy levels of gonzo action. But that's great. You want those dials that you can tune to get your players into it.
Yeah, 100%. And so my mind is spinning with ideas and excitement, and that's always a good thing to come out of a setting, to inspire the people that are gonna run it and play it and enjoy it. So brilliant. So with respect to using the 5e framework, is there anything else mechanically that helps Iron Kingdom sort of engage with players on a mechanical level rather than just a thematic or
on a mechanical level? I mean, it's one of the things where I think you have to be mindful. Like you could add. I mean, this is the same for any RPG. You could add so many layers of brand new systems in there. There are some things that are quite different for Iron Kingdoms, and I think that's because of how the setting, which does reflect how the setting views magic and so forth. So, for example, certain spells in Iron Kingdoms in the Iron Kingdom setting are not allowed from the SRD because you don't have planar travel and you can't just resurrect. Like if you resurrect someone from the dead, you'll have had to do something pretty bloody spectacular to do that, to bring them back from the dead unchanged. Like usually if someone comes back from the dead, they are undead, not
makes sense.
You know, you're not doing resurrection easily. So there are some alterations like that. Certain things are not considered black magic because of how, again, certain spells operate in the setting. And then, or not, you don't have to be evil to know that spell because it's just considered like it's just a spell. Like, but the things they do add in, which is again changes things, is with the classic is you play a wizard, you've got spell slots. You can do only X number of spells until you have a long rest to recharge your slots. So warcasters and warlocks do things a bit differently because they're limited instead by the arcane energies they can draw in from either their war beasts or from, because the way to they can channel energy or they can direct energy so that they can do things in a more kind of, they can pull off grander effects, but depending on how they do things, it's almost like directing energy from a steam engine to your warjacks and doing your spells, or it's like controlling nuclear power plants and trying to, like, you don't want your war beasts to get too angry, but you do want them to get angry enough to draw the energy from. So that's quite different mechanically for those characters to drawing that power to do spells. But then regular and magic users, you don't have to use a spell slot system. So instead, it's there, but now instead, the alternative is you can use the fatigue system. So that means that you can keep doing spells until your character passes out because you're just channeling so much raw energy through them. So now a spell that's a second level slot or whatever, that costs 2 fatigue points. And so you can keep going, and then you can go, right, if I do any more until a long rest, they will pass out. But, that's the fun of the risk. It's like, I've got to kill this sucker. Do I push my luck, do a fireball and not, fall flat on their face? So I think having those options again makes the setting feel different from the standard. I've done my spells for today. I'm done. I guess that kind of reflects back because I don't feel, and this is me reflecting on what I've written for this next Kickstarter. I don't expect Iron Kingdom's characters to go through a dungeon and go, and then I'm going to deal with this room and fight these things, and then deal with this one, and then we'll have a long rest, and then deal with the next however many rooms, and then have another long rest. Like, no, there is a time limit. There is a grander plot going on. You need to get through this. So I think that's why the fatigue system feels good for that, and why, especially for what I've written, I think I'm a bit of a git in my in the scenario room, because every room, I say room in inverted commas, is like a really, like, you could fight it, or if you were sensible, you should really just keep going through there and just ignore it, because it's not the main point of the plot. You're in a horrible place, but do you really need to kill it to keep going further? It's about having these options. That gives you some insight into what I've been writing. Then, I've written a scenario for the for the Kickstarter. So there's that takes, what is it? I think it's for levels 4 to 6, and we'll take them up to about level 8 or 10. And it's a bit of a road trip. That's all I'll say. It's a road trip, and there's themes of which are suiting for the setting of the wilderness, because that's the main focus. And there's it explores things that I'm interested in, so investigative horror, and when you've got a world that's been on the brink of an industrial revolution, is going through an industrial revolution, that's had an invasion of infernal forces as well, then where this starts dealing with things, and where I was looking for the idea of what's important about this one group of this one faction setting. What should we be investigating? Like, how have they changed? And it's like, well, clearly this setting we have to address the problem of ecological destruction. So there's an element of eco horror within the setting. Like, what happens when magically enthused industrial revolution starts going bad? And I mean really bad, like toxic wastes, and and what happens when we see it in our own world, but imagine what happens when we've got an open cast mine, but it's being done with, but what you're pulling out of it is also magical. Like, what does that mean to the world?
These are good questions. Scary, but good questions. So when is it we can sort of get to see what you've written, get to sort of delve into the deep wilds, as it were?
So as we're recording this, I don't know the exact date. I know there was a Kickstarter update recently for the previous one that revealed the name of the Kickstarter is The Deep Wild. So the exact date, I don't know. I have no control over that. So it is coming, though. I will say that it is coming. So it's literally, I would say it's within the next month or so. Definitely within the month. It's one of those things. They're currently shipping all the Nightmare Empire books out to backers currently, so that means that will be in shops fairly soon for people to buy from bricks and mortar. And yeah, it's and then also the other thing I'll say for people that are also like, how does it work with the war? How does this make sense with the war game? So everything about the Iron Kingdom's Requiem RPG is set, technically all the stuff we write is set before the war game. So it's this idea that the RPG the world is easy to explore as an RPG between the flashpoints of kingdoms clashing with giant bloody robots. So yeah, that's how it fits with the war game. So War Machine 4th edition is set a few years after the RPG is technically set.
All right. Well, going from something that is coming to something that is available now, and sort of on the flip side of the mechanical, moving into the sort of the power armor and the super suits, the super soldiers, the space marines, moving into your work with Cubicle 7 for Wrath and Glory and their latest release, Threat Assessment Xenos.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because I know that's a passion of yours as well.
That's been a book that since Wrath and Glory first came out, like even when it was under like the auspices of Ulysses Spiel North America, is like people have been wanting this book because it's a book. It's a beastry book. It's like there's no two ways about it. It's a beastry book. It's a beastry book of all of the Xenos races for Warhammer 40,000, except for Tyranids. So you've got your Tau, which is interesting because we've not really seen much Tau in Wrath and Glory so far. We've got Tau, we've got every flavour of Eldari, so let's be honest, space elves. You've got you've got orcs, Necrons, and you've got I can't think of Genestealer Cult. So we don't have Tyranids, but we have Genestealer Cult. And yeah, I mean, when you've played Warhammer 40,000, you've played with Games Workshop setting for that long, and I have a Genestealer Cult gang for Necromunda. The opportunity to go like, here are the codices. Here's everything you know from any other books that you dabble in. Like if you know stuff from Necromunda, great. If you know stuff from Kill Team, brilliant. And make these, make these actual useful antagonists for the game, and in a way that is they kind of represent what they should do in the war game, and that's the challenge, because you have to recognize where things in the war game don't really reflect well when it gets to the RPG. Like Space Marines in the RPG versus Space Marines on the war game are two different things, because you're playing cinematic Space Marines. A Space Marine should be able to kill 100 Imperial Guardsmen without breaking a sweat. In the war game, good luck, because it's a war game. It has to be fun. It has to be playable. You can play. They have done in the past. There was in White Dwarf, like back in 2004. It would be that long ago. Playing cinematic Space Marines, and so your 1,000 point army of Space Marines is 5 Space Marines. That's it, and you can play against any other 1,000 point army of, I don't know, Tyranids or Tau or whatever. And so every Marine in your army is, worth a squad or two on their own. Good luck trying to kill them. So you kind of have to have that feel, and that also then, therefore, for threat assessment, Xenos has to reflect how you build and how you create those antagonists. Because, again, in the war game, a Gene Stealer, for example, is not too scary, but from what we know from the literature and from other things, like Gene Stealers are terrifying. They can take out a Terminator. They can take out a Marine in tactical dreadnought armor, which is Terminator armor, quite easily. And so you have to kind of reassess what you're looking at. So the challenge then with that book is getting the flavor in, and making it feel right. So it isn't just, we've translated that weapon straight to the RPG. Because, like, shuriken cannons are terrifying monomolecular, shuriken launching weapons of the Eldari. They should slice through everything. In the war game, they're kind of pea shooters. They're and like last, and if you've played Darktide recently, the computer game on PC, which is you're playing Imperial Guardsmen basically, and an Orcarin or Psychers. Like, las guns in that game are not torches, as we like to call them in the war game. Like, las guns in that game feel quite, chonky. Like, they can do some damage. So again, there's that. That's the challenge of writing threat assessment. Xenos was trying to get that all in, and then of course, on top of that, you've got how to approach some of the stuff tactfully about these factions. Like, I didn't write write anything for the Drakari chapter, but Drakari is essentially, they are space elves when Clive Barker. Like, that's a tough thing to write about, but comparatively, also tough is writing about how Gene Stealers, for the Gene Stealer cult, and that's something I had to address, is how do you talk about Gene Stealers, the Gene Stealer cult, tactfully, because you've also got to address the fact how the Gene Stealer cult and Gene Stealers proliferate, for want of a better word. It is not nice. It is, you are talking about how they infect people and their progeny are infected, and that causes mutations, etc., and that you've got, and the Imperium is not a nice place, and it's like you got to think about what's going to be, how do you address that point that there are children infected with the Gene Stealer curse, that they are effectively no longer human. It's tricky. I mean, so you just got to use your words carefully, and I think people that understand those words properly can infer the rest, and that's the point. Like, again, it's up to you on how far you want to get into the horror and how graphic you want to paint it. And I think this comes back to the thing of, like, perspective. Like, the Imperium is a hellhole. It's a fascist hellhole. But then, even within that, people can be heroes, and I think that's the point for Wrath and Glory is you can be heroes, and the question is, you're a hero, but there is a cost, and sometimes heroes to do what may well be the right thing for humanity, or if you play Eldari, the right thing for Eldari, comes at the cost of other people or certain moral choices, and that's what makes it interesting. And then you can pull back and have a satirical comment about like how the Imperium is just like a discussion of British politics in the 80s, which has come back to bite us in the ass.
There are many different ways to take the source material, should we say, but there is something for everyone, and the book is fantastic. I've had the chance to sort of have a flick through it. The artwork's amazing. The I've got so much inspiration for a Wrath and Glory game I'm going to be running for a group on our Discord. We're putting a group together. So yeah, thank you for being a part of that, because it's a great book to read, and obviously if you mentioned certain topics can be approached with certain sensibilities, and the book does cover that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot in there for players to use, and I think it just gives a sense of what's coming on the horizon. I mean, we already know. I can already say this. There's threat assessment, heretics or something like that. So there's a chaos book coming.
Interesting.
And that's all you can say. I'm going to say there's a chaos book coming for it, and it's like, okay, chaos antagonists. Let your mind go to all those wonderful. And let's be honest, I don't know who's going to pick the short straw in writing about Slaanesh. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun discussion for the writers that week.
Indeed. That's an interesting drawing of straws, I fear.
I'll be done by someone who I wouldn't say it's drawing the short straw. I would say it's going to be a fun thing, but it has to be done with the right kind of respect.
Absolutely. So moving on from what there will be, what there is now, to what we can listen to at our own sort of convenience. Darker Days Radio has and is releasing Dark Iron, your Iron Kingdoms podcast. You mind telling us a little bit about that?
We haven't even recorded the first episode yet. I'm still kind of planning it. So it's going to be a bit like the Darkhammer episodes. So we will do, we'll take a chunk, a slice, whether it's a horizontal or vertical slice through the setting, and really just look at something interesting to explore within the Iron Kingdom setting. Some concept that you might want to explore through roleplay, and then look at what published material there is to help facilitate that. So, if you want to run, again, if we think about it, you want to play Sharp and his rifleman, how would you do that with Iron Kingdoms? Where in the setting would you place those characters? Do you do something where it feels a little historical? So do you play something which is during the first invasion of the Scorn into Signar? So that goes back to the Witchfire trilogy. All those kind of things, because there are lots of flashpoints for drama. There's lots of different things that you can basically pick out and expand upon, and it's really just about how what tools are there, how they help you to do that, and maybe because it's not endorsed by Privateer Press, I just happen to write for them. We'll maybe even look at like some ideas from other useful D&D books out there, because why the hell not? I mean, more power to anyone that's buying stuff. So I'm sure there's stuff that we can pull from, Strahd or something like that, and be like, right, let's do that. Or even better, I'm sure I'll have to like ask my D&D co-host James. He'll mostly have some other ideas of like, oh, if we put that and take that Iron Kingdoms idea and inject it into a regular D&D setting, this is what it means. Because that's also something I didn't say. It's like there's nothing stopping you taking anything from Iron Kingdoms and just chucking it in your regular D&D setting. If you go, I want Warjacks, then do it.
Yeah.
Like, who's going to stop you?
Exactly. I mean, we have spoken a lot and covered Iron Kingdoms and Wrath and Glory, the podcast, some sort of Warhammer in general as well. Is there anything at this point of the interview we haven't spoken about you want to bring up now, Chris?
Oh, let's think. I can't talk about that project right now.
Do love those answers.
Yeah, I've done some writing for Cult, so that's an occult horror RPG. So there's something coming out for that at some point. So that's kind of, again, allow me to look at some of the things I'm interested in with that kind of flavor of horror, where it's modern day horror, and that was fun to look at, given that because Cult uses kind of a version and extrapolation of the Powered by the Apocalypse system. So, and Cult's just as a book, it's such a beautiful book to pick up and read. So, and then stuff coming up, I am endeavoring to plan for conventions this year, because obviously I've now, since before Christmas, passed my driving test finally. At age 40, I can drive. So we've got ChillCon in Sheffield coming up, which is a war games convention. So I am planning to run some War Machine 4th edition demos there, and I have my eye on the horizon of to UK Games Expo and what demos I could run there, and the same with Dragon Meet in December and Tabletop Scotland in Edinburgh. That would be really good. So I'm kind of like working out what I need to do with those. But the fact I now have a car and I drive, and it means like I can look at my collection of terrain and get the miniatures together and go like, I'm going to run some Iron Kingdoms RPG, and have the miniatures and the terrain for the final kind of showcase, kind of like, finale of the scenario that I run. So that's kind of exciting, and why, when you're dealing with Wrath and Glory or any of the Warhammer RPGs or with Iron Kingdoms, that's where it's really exciting. Is there's actually miniatures, like they are thematically correct to the setting. Like, what's a Warjack? It's one of these. I've got one on the table. I painted it. I bought it from them. It looks awesome. It's one of these. And everyone go, oh, okay, that's what we're being killed by.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're hoping, or I'm hoping to get to some work dependent, but we'll see how the convention thing pans out. But no, it'd be great to sort of meet in person if we get to a couple of the same conventions. And for those that are going to attend those conventions, look out for Chris and the other great UK podcasters and content creators that will undoubtedly be attending. So we can find you in the meantime before people come and track you down and meet and greet you at these conventions. Where can we find you, Chris, and all the things you're associated with, please? So
there's Darker Days Radio, so that's www.darker-days.org. We are on episode, it says 227, so we've recently, my co-host Mike and Chick have done a Dark Fantasy RPG Alternatives episode, so they've looked at, obviously with OGL and the whole hoo-ha over that. It's a way of looking at what other options out there that don't involve rolling a d20 in a particular setting or system, I mean. So there's all those episodes there, and that's all free. There's stuff on our YouTube you can get for free as well. All those links you can find though through the podcast link. Obviously, through that, you'll get to all the stuff we've published on Drive-Thru RPG. There are various scenarios there for V5, so Vampire Masquerade 5th Edition, or for Chronicles of Darkness. And then, of course, for all my stuff, that's at www.christopher-handley.com. And I sometimes never try to write about my day job there. I'll mostly write a bit more about that after I'm off my current project and I decompress from it. And I can talk all about the wonderful world of cloud computing and AWS, because that is my life right now as well. Yeah. Oh, and you see painted toy soldiers. Yeah, that's always nice.
Well, I like it, so that's fair. I will make sure there are links to all of those things down in the description below. As you stated, one link will link to many links, so we'll try and make sure I'll make sure they're organised in a decent way. Chris, it has, as always, been a pleasure to get you back on the show, and I'd love, as always, to get you back on in the future to discuss other projects, Darker Days Radio, or anything else.
Have to just discuss your Wrath and Glory campaign, see how that's going.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, with threat assessment, Xenos, and what is currently out there, I'm going to, on a different tact but similar in style from Cubicle 7, I'm going to start running a Soulbound campaign as well.
Awesome.
So
Soulbound's good stuff as well.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There's so many good. I think that's the only thing I can say is like I'm very lucky to have worked on what I would say is like the kind of the four big, at least at the time it was, but I still think it's still important. The four big wargaming IPs as RPGs, so it's incredibly lucky to do that and just like geek out about it.
Well, I look forward to the next time we can geek out like this or in person in the future, Chris. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the show, then go to www.snydersreturn.squarespace.com. Alternatively, you can find us over on Twitter @ReturnSnyder. We have a Linktree link in the description of this episode. And if you want to support us, come and join us over on Patreon. And we also have a Discord server. Please leave us a review because we'd love to learn how to improve the channel and provide better content out for those who are listening. Until we speak again, thank you.